basically we were in their house. I'd been invited in. We were trying to finalize the deal. And at some point they just got up and said, "You have clearly wasted your time and my time. Let me show you to the door. We're not doing this."
Welcome to the Fueling Deals Podcast, the podcast that teaches how to accelerate your business growth through all types of deals. It's time to fuel up, so buckle in with your host, Corey Kupfer.
There are only two ways to grow your business: organically through sales, marketing, and providing great products and services, and inorganically through deals. Too many companies focus on only the first way, organic growth. Welcome to the podcast, which will help accelerate your business growth inorganically. My guests are a huge variety of deal makers and experts on all types of deals who have personal experience that can help you grow, get clear, learn best practices, and avoid mistakes. We discuss everything from large, complex mergers and acquisitions to smaller deals that you can do even without significant capital. My guest today is Chris Wilkerson. He's an operator, investor, and advisor to startups and buyouts of niche cash flow positive companies. Portfolio companies include opportunities in hospital services, creative marketing, talent management, and property management. And I'm thrilled to have Chris on the show. We've known each other for over a decade from Entrepreneurs Organization. Chris, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Corey. Thrilled to be here as well.
Excellent. So Chris, you're a founder and CEO of High Bar Capital, and we're going to talk about that and some of the deals that you do. But before we go there, I'd like to take you back to when you were a little kid. And what did you want to be when you grow up? Because maybe I'm wrong, but my guess is, an investor and deal maker might not have been what you were thinking about at 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 years old.
I can guarantee you that was not what I was thinking about. But I can tell you, starting in 5th grade is when I started my first business. And my parents wrote a book called Businesses Your Kids Can Start. And they wrote the book, they published it, and then they realized they probably needed a test case. And I became their first test case. So I started a business called Pachysandra Plus. And between 5th grade and when I got out of college, I was running a plant nursery, growing mountain laurel, rhododendrons, pachysandra, myrtle, et cetera. And it was a pretty fascinating experience. But my dress code involved a pair of shorts, bare feet, and nothing else.
Oh, I love it. And, that actually anticipated the next question I usually ask on the podcast, which is, what was your first real business you started? So do you consider that your first real business? How have you might define that?
I absolutely do. It paid for all my expenses from high school and college, which was pretty fantastic.
I love it. And I love the fact that your parents wrote a book like that. And then, you were the guinea pig. Is that book still available, or is it long out of print?
Yeah, I think this was a limited run of a self-publication.
Got it. Well, listen, that's great. I mean, I love, it's interesting to me because I find, with so many parents of our entrepreneurial colleagues, sort of the pressure is more in the other direction sometimes when people say they want people to go to school and get an education and go work for somebody and make a good salary. And your parents were encouraging you to be an entrepreneur from a very early age. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
So give us a couple of minutes on what High Bar Capital does and what you and your team do and, the types of investments you make and deals you do.
Yeah. So with High Bar Capital, our ongoing investment thesis is we want to own a more than majority, so a significant portion of 3 to 5 businesses at any given point. We want to be able to start coming into those, whether we're starting them up or we're acquiring them. But as they are growing and kind of getting their legs below them, make sure that we are helping set the strategy, set up some of the internal operations, and really work with the team. And this is everything from helping them, using things like rock habits, to set them down the right trajectory so that as we work with them, it's really measurable and we can scale appropriately. So we're either going to run them for cash, and some of them we're growing for a sale. But we try to take the approach to give us that luxury that we're not up against a timeline to make the decision.
Great, yeah, because there's another approach that some other acquirers / investors do, which is they're less concerned, right, with cash flow, and they're looking to basically buy a company to increase its enterprise value, market value, and then flip it. And I hear you saying that that's not your model.
No, and part of the thought process behind that is running the businesses that I have, the lifestyle that I have, and with my family. We want to make sure that we give ourselves some great flexibility in what we want to do, so our goals are aligned across all three, and very much look at these businesses. I love running them. I love building them, having that excitement there and working with the teams. But I also want to make sure that I'm doing it for the right reasons, which is largely for the employees to help them benefit, obviously the customers, but also for my family, so we can do things that we want to as a family.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And it's one of the things that I often talk about with entrepreneurs. There's a number of reasons why we become entrepreneurs, right? We have a vision. We think we can do it better. We don't want to work for somebody. But one of the things that, I'm amazed sometimes is that some quote unquote entrepreneurs basically buy themselves, a job or get married to their business, and they don't, like, what are the objectives? Why do we become an entrepreneur? For me, one of my highest objectives is freedom, and to design the life I want, and that's why I become an entrepreneur. And I hear you taking the same approach, so it really resonates with me.
Yeah, my wife and I always refer to it as lifestyle by design.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So you've done a number of deals over the years. They've ranged from financing acquisitions and business partnerships is something I know that you and I have talked about in the past as well. And there's some pitfalls and challenges in that area. So talk to us a little bit about how you do those right, and maybe where you've learned some things over the years, and what our listeners can understand about those kind of deals.
Yeah, and I think there's two approaches, two items that I'll talk about. One is in an acquisition, and it was probably one of my earliest lessons. It took me, the one business that I acquired in particular that I'm thinking about, it took me 3 times to get to the table to get the deal done. And that was done over the period of about 9 months. And at one point, one of the owners of the company, basically, we were in their house. I'd been invited in. We were trying to finalize the deal. And at some point, they just got up and said, "You have clearly wasted your time and my time. Let me show you to the door. We're not doing this." And my jaw kind of hit the ground. And it was because I had missed some clues, largely around what was important to the current owners. The second one was who was really making the decision. And I made a mistake on who I thought was really guiding the conversation. It had nothing to do with ownership. It truly was about influence. And I missed that mark. And after I was shown the door, it truly took me 6 months to get back in to talk to them about it after kind of emotions had cooled off.
So I'd love to delve into that piece a little bit, because it's so important, because understanding what the other side wants, what they care about, what's important to them. And what's interesting to me in doing all the deals I've done is sometimes they make that very clear, and maybe we hear it or don't hear it. And sometimes I find that they might not even be clear on what's really important to them. Mm-hmm. So can you talk a little bit more about either in that particular situation or in other situations where, how you go about figuring out and hearing what's important to the other side and how that affects your deal making?
Absolutely. I think very early on when I started doing the investing, my focus was so much on, hey, show me your financials. Let's look at the numbers. I'm sure we could get something worked out here, and we'll just and we'll get it done. It was a very green MBA-like approach. And what I realized is that doesn't work. And so now where I spend my time is actually trying to spend as much time with the owners, with the company, and looking to see what they say, ideally how they don't say, what their body language is during certain conversations, to also, if I have an opportunity to talk to other family members who may be involved with the business, and even the employees if I can, and ask them, hey, what has it been like working with, with the owners? What have you seen that's really important to them? What do they value? And my experience so far has been it's more around what they don't say and or the tactic. I mean, I've had a deal that I'm looking at currently, and the one individual, the owner, has simply said, all I want you to do is take care of my girlfriend in this deal. And I was like, it's really interesting. Now, he was point blank about what he wanted, but most of the time it is what they don't say that I'm looking for.
Yeah. And, I really think about that a lot because I've had experiences similar to that where there are things that you would not expect that were, ultimately what got the deal done or not. I can think of just two examples. One was a firm in the wealth management industry where, the guy was already pushing his 70s. He definitely wanted to retire. He wanted some time on his own. That was clear. He liked the money on the deal. That wasn't the problem. He liked the people who were the buyers. But for some reason, the deal wasn't getting done. And what we, without going into a long story, what we ultimately determined was, the guy didn't want to fully give it up. It was his baby. He had founded it. He had whatever. And when they told him he could be the executive chair, of the board, which is really an honorary position, and that if he wanted, with his top 5 clients who he had for 30 years or whatever, he could still be on phone calls. That closed the deal. It wasn't more money. It wasn't anything else. And we had another one that was similar where they realized they had to let the guy keep his office so that he could come in.
Corey, I was just going to share that. I had a friend of mine who did something, and it truly came down to him being able to keep his office so he had somewhere to go.
Yeah, it's amazing. And sometimes it's about, feeling useful. I mean, frankly, in this guy's case, it was much more about the fact that, he didn't want to be home with his wife 100% of the time. And you can judge that, but that's what it was for him. And they had to address that need.
Yeah, and it's tough for him to probably verbalize that, but I've seen that specific example once or twice.
Oh, totally. So what are some of the other things that you've come across, in terms of learning lessons or things you did right or things that, you didn't do right in the past in terms of these types of investment deals, business partnership deals, acquisition, et cetera?
Yeah, on the partnership side, I have a one business that sells hospital services, and we were selling into hospitals, and we realized that there are a lot of other people who are selling significantly larger dollar size deals than we were, and they're a managed service company, and they might end up coming in and then being in the hospital, and we would end up selling to them. So we took the approach of, hey, let's create a partnership where they could bundle our service because they were hiring us already, and actually try to create a win with them so that it was a financial win, whether to the larger corporation as well as to the individual. And we did that 3 or 4 times with probably some of the top managed service companies in the country. Every single one of them, I would give ourselves a B- in terms of success at the highest rating. We continue to get a lot of business out of them, but we never cracked kind of the alignment that we needed because a corporate development officer who was doing the partnerships loved what we were doing. They said, this is so great. We can actually, we can offer your service at a discount to our clients. That's a win for us. You can pay, you can give us some of the money. That's a financial win for us as well. So we thought we were creating 2 wins for one of our client. We were creating a 3rd win for the hospital. We said, this is fantastic. And we invested a significant amount of time and money into it. What we realized was the disconnect between the excitement of a purchasing office doing a deal and someone who was on the front line who made the decision, and they didn't care. And they just said, we're going to hire you, and we don't care about the deal that you've done. And they always wanted to rework it. And we often got caught in the middle between a corporate purchasing group and their own employees. And it often got, unfortunately, ugly when we were actually trying to create wins. So the partnerships have been very challenging for us to create. And we have a couple learnings out of it, but those have been some of the most difficult things we've ever done.
It's interesting because we always talk about, those kind of partnerships, or some people would call them strategic alliances, are, tempting. And listen, there are some that work out really, really well. And I think they're actually underutilized in a lot of ways where, I'll often say to clients, hey, who else, as opposed to banging on doors yourself, who else is already in that market? Can you do a deal with them to partner or to do a strategic alliance where they're already selling into your market? Or, are there other companies in your industry, either, vertically or laterally, or maybe they do the same thing what you do, but it's in a different geography that you can do an alliance or a partnership with? And they make sense, and some of them really work out. But, there are a number of factors that can be challenging. And I think one of the ones that you identified was who are all the players, who are all the stakeholders in it that have to make it work, and have they all bought into it?
I think that's absolutely true. And specifically from our experience, and again, this was working through what we thought was the right group, the corporate purchasing group. We realized that as soon as the opportunity that we were offering came to light, everyone wanted a little bit of piece of the pie. And what happened is our incentive was so diluted across all the parties that each party said, that's not worth my time and effort. Whereas in retrospect, if we had given the incentives to maybe one or two of the parties involved, it could have been highly successful.
Great. Any other lessons or learnings either out of that deal or other deals that you've done in this whole business partnership, strategic alliance area? I
think the other area was how the services were going to be sold. For example, we had kind of in our mind an unspoken assumption of, you will put us in as part of your offering and white label us. And we had gotten some verbal confirmation that would happen. And then in reality, no one wanted to do that. So I think the other one is to really get the assumption, you think is an assumption, and have a serious conversation about making sure that everyone's on the same page about it, and then understanding how your partner is going to do it and how you're going to deliver on it. And we made some assumptions, and it became very clear that what we assumed was not going to happen.
Oh, that's great advice. And just to take a step back for any of our listeners who don't know the concept of white labeling, Chris, would you explain those kind of deals? What you do when you white label something?
Absolutely. So we have our company would come in. We would typically sell to a hospital under our company name. And that would be the normal process. With a white label, we would allow one of the managed service companies to sell it as their service, and they would invoice the client, and we would just come in and say, no, we're part of this larger service company, a division effectively, and no one knew that we were a separate company whatsoever.
And that's a pretty popular deal, fueling deals, listeners, that's done in software, for example, where, there's a separate company that develops some sort of software application, SaaS product, whatever it is, and they allow other people to use their branding on it. And it may be totally white labeled where you have no idea that any other company's involved. Or sometimes you'll see, on these apps and products and sites, you'll see, it's ABC company powered by XYZ.
Correct.
That's often a white label deal, right? The powered by is the people who really produced it. They have something they probably do for multiple companies, and they allow another company to put their branding on it. They may tailor it a little bit, customize it a little bit, but fundamentally it's it's a off-the-shelf product. Something similar happens. I've done some food industry deals, where, for example, store brands are often made by brands you've heard of. It's whatever, I'm making this up, but Walbaum says Ragu making their sauce, and they sell it under their own brand. So this is the kind of deal that happens in various ways in a number of industries, and it's an interesting opportunity to pursue. Although Chris is giving us some of the caveats on where they go wrong.
I still love them. I'm just telling you, I've learned from doing them a couple times.
Right. So just to, and you've sort of alluded to it in the negative way, but if we wanted to summarize, what are some of the tips on how you do those deals right? What would you say?
From my perspective, is to make sure that it is core and critical to your partner, the service that you're offering, so that they want to promote it and it's easy for them to promote it. We found that if it was an awkward conversation, someone said, "Hey, I just don't know how to bring this up," that it never went anywhere. But if it was core to what they were doing, it was much easier. The second one is making sure you had that we get the financial assumptions and incentives right for the parties that are going to make the decision, not just someone in the back office. And I think that third is really making sure that it's delivered in a seamless, natural way. Not that it's like, hey, I'm going to flog this product too, and because I might make some money on it. Because the end customer always sees that, at least from our perspective.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The end customer sees it, and at the same time, on the second point you raised, ultimately it's salespeople who are selling this stuff. And listen, frankly, if salespeople aren't clear on how they're going to make more money from something, they're not going to sell it.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we do get it right, it's easy for them to do it, and it doesn't seem like they're selling it. They go, this is a natural fit for what we do and why our client trusts us. We would love to include this because this makes us look good to our client because we found a solution that we couldn't offer without you. And that's when we knock it out of the park.
Oh, that's great. So any other, talk to us a little bit about some of the other types of deals that you do and some tips and lessons on any of those.
Some of the other ones have been actually, starting the businesses up from scratch, and I've got some experience there where we've raised some money at the get-go, put a deal together to actually build the business, and for that one, I think one of the big lessons that we had, and I described earlier what our perspective is and how we approach it. A lot of these are for cash flow. Some are with the intent to resell. But the timeline that we have might be different than some investors. So when we raised capital and we went into a deal with some partners, it's really important for us to make sure that it's not just the money that's coming in, it's that we have a partner who thinks like us and truly understands how we're going to operate, particularly since we're always looking for a control position.
So that's great. Let's delve into that a little bit because all money, anybody who does this stuff, more than once, starts to understand if they didn't know in advance that all money is not equal. And you basically said that, right?
Absolutely.
And there's smart money and dumb money, quote unquote. And then there's also strategic money and just money, right? And then on top of that, you have just, the personalities and getting along and the, vision alignment and all that kind of stuff. So can you delve a little bit more into, and then obviously there's also a million ways you raise money, right? Whether it's private, public, angels, friends and family, VCs, et cetera. So can you give us a little bit more about, how you've raised money from whom and how you've worked to assure that they're the right fit, the right type of money, the right type of people?
Yeah. So I think there's kind of three categories that I have done. One is I've done some debt, and that was just through banking relationships, and actually was able to take advantage of some tax incentives. So this was many years ago, but originally the Brooklyn Navy Yard, and I'm based here in New York City, it was considered an economic incentive zone. And I moved a business into the Navy Yard and was able to take advantage of some tax incentives there, which was fantastic. So I mention it because by doing that, and those tax incentives were immediate, it actually reduced the amount of capital I had to raise. So that was, it was the approach there was, how do I reduce what I need to raise, which made it easier. And the second part of that was doing some bank debt, which is not terrifically exciting, but the terms are pretty clear, and it was easy to follow.
Right. And let's just let me take a moment there, because I want to mention that under the recent tax law changes, which, whether you agree, disagree, or whatever, they're in there. One of the things that came in that bill was a very robust opportunity zone program around the country, in which there are various of these tax incentives similar to the kind, that Chris mentioned that he used years ago, for businesses starting up in one of, I forget how many, there's 1,800 something zones around the country.
They're
and
fantastic.
Yeah, and also for companies that, like, if you own property and you can do we won't get into the details of what a 1031 like kind of exchange is on this show, but if you own real estate or other businesses that you can roll in, there's some big incentives there. So it's just something to mention, we have on another episode or two, we'll delve into those more deeply. But just because Chris mentioned tax incentives, it's something that if you're doing deals, you want to see what's available.
Yeah, and Corey, I've done it with one of the 1031s, and again, fantastic opportunities. But on the capital raise, I've also done it from a friends and family, which is always challenging. And the way that I did it is I went out. I was able to raise the capital that I needed for this specific deal. The people that I went after understood the market, but in order to keep things relatively clean, I put a personal guarantee on it, regardless of the outcome of the business. And that was, I'm not necessarily recommending it, but I did do it, and it did turn out very well. So that was attractive. And then the last one was raising from other angels, where we went in together. We took a controlling position, and the operating agreement became critical to how we were going to operate and what expectations were.
That's great. So just working backwards on those two, for people who are, an operating agreement is the agreement that governs the business partnership, but usually in an LLC, limited liability company structure, and it governs who has voting control, how decisions are made, how the money flows, all the what ifs. What if somebody wants out of the business, or they die, it becomes disabled, or all of those things. And yes, those are absolutely crucial. Going back on, when you gave the personal guarantee on the second one to friends and family, were you trying to, one of the big things on friends and family rounds that's risky is, of course, you have personal relationships that are involved. And if the deal goes bad, or people are unhappy, or they don't get their money back or make the kind of return they want, that could affect personal relationships. So was that part of the reason you decided to give the personal guarantees, to take that relationship risk element out of it, or was it for another reason?
It was because that was the way to try to lessen the intensity of the friends and family relationship was part one, and two, it was because I knew that the other part of it was, I said, there is not a time horizon that I'm going to pay this back, and I just said, you should assume that this is going to get paid back in 15 to 20 years. So I set their expectation way out, and then was just set it up so that I could pay it back as early as I could. I paid it back within 5 years, which was ideal, and but I was paying interest the entire time. And so that at the end of every month, I wrote a check to a couple people on interest only, and then I had a balloon payment at the end when I was ready.
Yeah. So listen, clear expectations are crucial in any type of deal, but when it comes to friends and family, I think that's a hugely important tip.
Yes. Yes, it was.
That's great. So, before we close out, I've got a couple last questions for you, but anything else in terms of your deal experience on what worked or didn't work that you haven't mentioned yet that you might be useful for our audience?
The only last point that I can think of is using time to your advantage when you can. I've always found that if I felt rushed, or someone was able to create artificial deadline, what I viewed as real deadlines and they viewed as artificial, it can box you in. Now, you can use that technique, but I've often found that keeping the pressure up gently and then using an artificial deadline and having the confidence to walk away greatly increases our ability to negotiate terms that are favorable, not only to us, but for all parties, because I want everyone to win. Right.
You want everyone to win, and at the same time, you need to get a deal done, right? So you need to have something that moves it along.
Exactly.
Great. So, Chris, before I ask you my last question, where can people, if people want to find out more about you and what you do, or reach out to you, what's the best place to contact you?
Yeah, absolutely. Email, I live in my email, very responsive there. So my email at cw@highbarcapital.com. Absolutely feel free to use.
Awesome. That's great. So my final question before we close out, authenticity for me is something that's super important, and there's a reason my book's called Authentic Negotiating. And the way I define authenticity is it's not about morals or integrity, although that's obviously, I don't think you'd be authentic if you're out of integrity, but it's even more so about aligning what you do with your truth, with really who you are, with your values, what you truly believe in, what's true for you on a deep level inside. So when you make business decisions and when you do these deals, how important is that to you, and how do you go about doing that?
I'm going to think about that. How do I go about this?
Yeah. So you're considering a deal. I know you, and from what you said earlier, I have a feeling the answer is yes. You talked about how you make sure your business aligns with, your lifestyle. You design that,
correct,
right, and whatever. So, so you're really conscious about the fact that you're not just doing things willy-nilly for money or for ego or for whatever. So I'm assuming, when you evaluate deals, in addition to the partners involved and the business opportunity and the money you can make, that there must be other factors that you look at in terms of how those deals align with your vision, lifestyle, goals, and values.
Okay, absolutely. And so this is, I think, an example of how I, as an individual, have grown and encourage those that I work with to grow as well. So I have a business partner who's been with me for 10 years, and both of us are firmly committed to only doing deals where we know we can have a positive impact in several different areas. One is to each of us individually, financially, but also fitting both of our lifestyles. The second is that we're making a really positive impact on the lives of the people that we're working with, who might be employees of the company or vendors, and we've got examples in several cases of that, where we're helping them really improve. And an example of that is, when people join us, they gather skill sets and they leave. We refer to it as graduating because they've been able to move on to something else, and we love that. But the third area is that having a social impact into the communities that we're working in. And examples can include, for us, where we're working with, in the healthcare services where we do some very specialized cleaning and disinfecting, we've actually brought those services into the communities of our employees because they had situations and they brought an opportunity to us, and we donated time and effort back. But all the businesses we look at, we want to make sure that there's wins on multiple fronts. And so it's to us, to our employees, and to the communities that we work in.
I love it. And what I hear is that those three criteria become a filter for you through which you evaluate deals, in addition to evaluating their financial, viability and the partners, et cetera.
It's actually the first filter. Those three criteria are the first filter, because it's not worth us looking at financials unless we know that there's an opportunity to hit all three of them positively.
I love it. You're talking my language. That's fantastic. So listen, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely, Corey. Thank you for the opportunity.
And thank you, Fueling Deals listeners, for tuning in. Remember, there's only one difference between companies that grow inorganically and those that don't. And it's unrelated to size, amount of capital, or any other factor, other than that the owners and executives of companies that do deals make a decision to do deals, and then they take action. It's time to refuel. So until next week, Corey Kupfer signing out.
Thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to leave Fueling Deals a rating and review on iTunes and Google. Check out all our episodes at fuelingdeals.com to find out more resources to accelerate your business growth.